Hello and welcome back to Raise Gaming and more Monster Hunter Wilds talk. IGN earlier this month revealed they're covering Wilds with some early information, interviews and new gameplay, and we're going to get more and more as January goes on. To kick us off though, they gave us 2 hunts. Not too much longer after that, there was a light interview and also now this video yesterday about how cooking works in this more seamless world. It's a nice concept with some real detail about how they're really serious about every aspect of this game that we're going to talk about. The level of detail they went into the animations and thought behind that is really cool. They've also teased some sort of relationship mechanic with the villages that I'm going to highlight and other details I'm going to talk about. And not only that, we had the first collab event related to Monster Hunter Wilds announced. You might want to take part in that for some special rewards. But let's start with the most relevant thing since it happened so suddenly, that cooking video and the surprise reveal with it. Because, of course, within it, there's a very clear reveal of a returning monster, Gravios. As shown on the minimap at about 25 seconds into the video, the hunter begins preparing a portable barbecue while standing in the oil well basin. As they do that, the minimap spins around with the camera, revealing 2 of the same monsters somewhere on the map, and that icon is very clearly Gravios. But it's even more obvious if you happen to understand the text on screen, as many people have now said, that quite literally translates to Hunter Gravios, so that's maybe a potential quest they could do in this locale, and so you gotta wonder, was this accidental at all if that was just on screen? Well, it turns out this wasn't a mistake, or maybe it was, because IGN, of course, have released this full hunt of Gravios himself. Did they release this because they realized, whoops, we kind of accidentally put it out there that it is in the game, so I guess we're allowed to put this video out now, maybe? Or maybe it was always planned and it was like a clever marketing strategy to get us interested, and then they released the video after that. Who knows? But either way, Gravios is here and we do actually get to see him in play. Things that I was going to talk about were interesting mechanics around this monster. It's basically a big armored rock, and as you can see, as it turns out, absolutely massive. A real unit that for some reason is making stock bear noises? I'm thinking that this is an early version and it's not going to sound like that in the full version. Surely, those are very familiar stock bear sounds, and this is of course not the released version of the game on a much earlier build. So in short, Gravios is this just big rock, a bigger version of Basirios. He can fire ridiculous beams, generate AoE fire explosions, and can also generate sleep, which is interesting. We still have that unknown sleep monster from when they showed us kind of hidden version of the smithy in regards to greatsword. I'm not convinced this is going to be the sleep monster because I believe based on the older weapons, they might have a bit of fire affinity, but not sleep. But it does seem like the ultimate version of Gravios, where they've taken all the different versions of him and crammed them into one. But you're definitely going to find that sharpness is going to be an issue with different physical weapons, and so you might want to time your attacks or do the right thing at the right moment. Generally, you'd be attacking, say, the stomach, breaking it once, now you have proper hit zones. You could break it twice, now you've got even better hit zones. Maybe you use traps and bombs to expose it to make that process a lot smoother for a more physical weapon. Or maybe you use something totally different, like hammer could be good for bonking, but pierce ammo and water element in general are very effective. So bow users, bowgun users shouldn't have a hard time with this. Something that people on Reddit are talking about is how they gave him kind of a very Teostra-esque move, where he's standing up on his hind legs and just firing this beam of fire under himself in AoE. But of course, this is more of a beam. Interestingly though, it does have a bit of Basirios in it, where we see a poison cloud being spread out. We see a new slinger ammo type, which does a lot of damage, so normal bombs are going to be relevant too. But yes, there's a slinger ammo that's going to be really relevant for this. He's got this really hard shell. How are we going to get through it? Well, we have the wound mechanic in Wilds in particular, and how is that going to be related to this monster in particular is important. Using these bomb pods to open up wounds, to break through, to expose what's under the shell could be pretty much a meta way to take on this monster. It's really cool because it looks like they've taken a monster that's not necessarily most people's favorites and really updated it. Combined all the different versions. Brought in, say, poisonous gas on top of the flame and sleep gas. You've got the really cool beam stuff, but he's now using it in different ways. And then we have the wound mechanic to challenge the awkward nature of the shell with a physical weapon. Honestly, they've done a great job here. A couple other cool details we saw in this gameplay then. Say the bow that he was using during some of the gameplay. It looks similar to the unnamed armor or weapon set that we see in the Switch Axe weapon trailer. We finally get anything for that monster, and it's just another weapon that seems to belong to the same monster, this time the bow. And it's quite an interesting looking bow. It's almost like holding a kite or something and firing from it. But when you get a look at it at the right time, it does appear to be the same greenish, purplish coloring theme, same one as the switch axe one in the weapon trailer. People have also noticed that this bow is doing ice damage, just like we saw with the switch axe, so it does seem likely. People are speculating that they could be revealing that monster at long last very soon with them doing this. And also in this footage, we do get a little bit of a hint of Rathian as well, which is nice to see. But with the introduction of Gravios, does that mean that there's going to be Basarius? Well, actually, there's kind of confirmation that there won't be. IGN did an interview and write-up in regards to Gravios and returning monsters in general. And in that, they talk about that new poison gas attack that previously would only be used by Basarios. And in that, they say the Monster Hunter developers did confirm that Basarius will not be joining Gravios in Wilds. So they basically just given us that kind of monster, made the ultimate version, and that's it. And I personally am all for that. Let's move on to other monsters. Let's bring in an old monster, returning monster, make it as good as you can. We don't need like a slightly different version of the same monster. I want more variety. And if they're going that way, awesome. Speaking of returning monsters, they do talk about quite a bit. They're talking about how Yan Kut-Ku was able to come back because passionate players were interested in that monster, and also say the herd system giving them a way to very much change the nature of that monster. And then they address, quote unquote, the elephant in the room. Which monster's comeback is most awaited out of those that haven't made an appearance in Wilds yet? And the response was, that would be Lagiacrus, and that was an instant reply. Ever since World, people ask us to bring back Lagiacrus, no matter where we go. And they say that I get the sense that monsters like Lagiacrus and Brachydios enjoy a particularly deep-rooted popularity. Gore Magala as well. So they're very aware, but they didn't say, oh, well, you know, maybe keep your eye out or something. They're just aware. Another funny topic is, say, you know, the whole flagship thing. Apparently Ray Dow and his design, the big boss, the apex predator of the Windward Plains, that was finished before Arkveld, the actual, you know, flagship. They refer to these unique monsters like Ray Dow as their handsome monsters, which is insane. And how they try to have these really cool monsters appear at just the right time so they stand out even more as a unique design. So they thought Ray Dow was in a great position for that even in the early design stage. They wanted to make sure it was really cool and to make it a big deal. But because they finished Ray Dow before they even got close to finishing Arkvelds, some of their own staff thought it was the game's main monster, the flagship, partway through development. That's just how cool he is. So we're not wrong in thinking that he was the flagship for a while, or could be. But yeah, once they finished Arkveld's design, they were all pretty satisfied that they had a flagship monster in that monster. But yeah, quite a lot of detail around a little surprise reveal of a monster, but there's some stuff to talk about with the main topic of the video too. Be aware that there's actually a write-up by IGN about this too, where there's more information there beyond what you get in the video. It covers a few topics like how in Wilds you can cook pretty much anywhere now, and how nice that is. Pulling up the portable barbecue as a cooking station beyond just the minigame like camping food. Therefore, the way they designed the ingredients to be used for this needed to be simple like cooking in camping. Still, it needed to be appealing in its presentation. They wanted a good balance between the main types, you know, fish, vegetable, and of course meat, but Tokida loves meat simply too much, it would seem. It's interesting to hear that they have this artistic view on how to make something appealing. How does it work? How to, you know, result in less waste so it's all eaten. Things like the micro expressions of the character in anticipation or their joyful smile after they have that first bite. Helpful advice from Tokida, such as make the meal bigger and put more meat in it. But there was an interesting talk about how it was difficult to make a cabbage look good to eat, like a plain roast cabbage. And it came into it where, you know, they're designing it to look more appealing rather than realistic. Having the hunter combine things like drizzling sauce on it, or adding something like an egg. Or the really subtle stuff like when you open up the lift as you initially reveal the cabbage, how it puffs up and grows in size as the steam releases and the air gets to it. It seems they took this really seriously and took a really long time with it. And the results they've got have been quite interesting. Like after the beta, people that are not even playing the game or even know what the game is were sharing images of their food, which is pretty cool. Now, another topic they talked about in regards to cooking was that core philosophy actually applying in cooking. You know, the big seamless world where they've tried really hard to keep everything uninterrupted by loading screens. How we can go from map A to map B, like, you know, the Windward Plains to the Scarlet Forest, without loading. Physically, you can just walk there. This applies to cooking, with the ability to sort of cook anywhere on the spot. It's a big change. This ties into, say, how they gave us 2 weapons to swap. The new mechanics to help that function with the gear that changes when you do so. That you don't have to go back to your tent or storage box to change your gear and decorations, breaking the flow. And with cooking, you don't have to stop and go to the right place. You can just do it wherever. Being able to do that while you're out in the world makes it feel more real compared to a lot of interrupting loading screens and so on. But also, you're exposed when you're doing it. If you just do it out in the open, we saw many clips of someone cooking and then being blasted by a monster the moment they end. So there's not only just like realism and this new feeling about it, but a lot of memes too. On that note, there's been a big change on the way that we complete quests. Like, you're not doing a quest, ending the hunt, then starting a new one, ending the hunt, and sort of going through a lot of loading screens, back to the town, back to the hunt, back to the town. So they had to change the way that you receive buffs from food as well, being now, of course, time-based, being more of a buff that lasts 30 minutes or however long, compared to, you know, you have the meal, you do the quest, you eat another meal, you do the quest, and so on. With this in mind, they had to introduce a new ration system. So apparently we're going to receive rations from the ingredient center. You'll find those in each base camp. You'll then use these rations to cook up whatever you want, meaning those rations let you cook meat, fish, or vegetables, no problem. It doesn't matter. That'll keep you from running out of one particular type. You have to go back and restock specifically because the rations are more universal. It's interesting how they've had to change these designs. But another big key feature of food in this game that's new is the tribes, the faction of people you'll find in the world. We obviously know the tribe from the beta, the one in the Windward Plains, but say with the Scarlet Forest, from the trailers and info we have there, we know that's going to be the Woodward tribe. But there's also, say, the Everforge in the oilwell basin, which is more of a crafting style tribe, but they'll all have their own unique village feasts, which will be different again related to each village. So I was wondering, you know, after these feasts, will that add to our roster of what we can cook out in the field? And how does that work? But it wasn't until I was reading the written up sort of article version of the interview that I caught that information. Here's what they say. You can continue to deepen your relationships with people in settlements even after you've completed the main story. Being offered food by them is not going to be a one-time thing just once during the story, but they'll actually come to invite you back every now and then. If you accept these invitations, that will result in a village feast that provides a powerful food buff that lasts for a long time. So even from a gameplay perspective, you'll receive more frequent offers by creating stronger bonds with the villagers. And while it is possible for you to gather local ingredients they would use themselves, trading with locals can also, say, get you lots of cheese. So they've intentionally designed the game so that changes in your relationships that take place through food also deepen your interaction with the world. I think that's a pretty big deal. You form a relationship with these people. You progress a relationship. That's an interesting mechanic in Wilds. They have their own cooking traditions and techniques using specific ingredients that you can find in those locales specifically. By having these feasts with them, maybe you'll start to understand the ingredients being used, and through that, actually use it in your own cooking. And further, you can get stockpiles of those ingredients if you interact with a village and get it from them directly, rather than blindly finding it in that locale. Further, you'll be invited to big feasts more often if you have a better relationship that you've built up. Those feasts provide special buffs, seemingly beyond what we normally cook up ourselves, and again, they last longer, those buffs as well. Josh mentioned to me that there used to be a sort of relationship mechanic in previous games related to food, so maybe that's just how they're bringing it back. Sounds like, you know, cooking is going to be a totally new experience for us in Wilds, beyond what we saw in the beta. So let's jump over to the collab event that's happening with Monster Hunter now, and our first Monster Hunter Wilds collab event ever. Between the two games, on February 3rd at 9 AM, this event begins, but the rewards don't seem insane. But it is our official first collab event, so it's worth talking about. Within Monster Hunter Now then, you're going to have some limited time event collab quests, tied to Monster Hunter Wilds of course. And by completing those quests, you earn a gift code that you then redeem for bonus items inside of Wilds. But there's also things you're going to get within Monster Hunter Now as well. So these are the main rewards. You've got the gift code, and then in-game we've got these layered hoodies with Monster Hunter Wilds on them, some guild card stuff, and some weapon and armor refining parts. Meanwhile, that code which you redeem for Wilds gives you something not too hefty, 10 mega potions, some dust of life, energy drinks, well done steaks, dash juice. It's not bad, and if you're already playing Monster Hunter now, then it's something to just take for free, but it's certainly not the most insane, you gotta get this, don't want to miss this for the launch of Wilds reward. But yeah, that launches on the 3rd of February. Now let's just cover some of the main highlights from the other interview that happened back on January 9th, or rather it was posted then by IGN with the same people, talking about evolving Monster Hunter and how their strong belief in the series has been a part of why it's been so successful now. It's no secret, but it's nice to hear that the development team is kind of on the same page, and that the major turning point for the series certainly was world. And it's interesting to look back on because the genres that were popular at the time of world being developed and then released just weren't anything like this. Competitive multiplayer games, and a lot of first-person shooters. Meanwhile, cooperation games certainly weren't in the mainstream. They were talking about how they might have to reconsider the form Monster Hunter takes in the future if multiplayer cooperative play just isn't something that works. But despite the current state of the space, they still had a lot of confidence about the type of fun that Monster Hunter games provide. They knew that the series grew in Japan for a reason, they just needed it to be able to land overseas. And so they decided not to change the core of the game. Sure, they were going to change some big things, but they performed what they called an analysis of what Monster Hunter fun is in order to keep that core. This was also when they basically created a really strong, as they call it, habit of looking into feedback that they received from overseas specifically, investigating where their issues with the series lies to be able to tackle it. And so with that strong awareness of the feedback, they're able to make the changes to ultimately succeed. I look now at Wilds and say the issues people had with the weapons in the beta and how they've already majorly changed every single weapon, and obviously a few in gross particular, even going back on some design changes because people weren't happy with it, with Insect Glaive bounce being a great example. With World gaining so much support and success globally, it basically gave them the supreme confidence to commit, that they'd found the core of the game for sure, and they could just keep going with it. And maybe that's part of why Wilds really does feel like that spiritual successor of World, or World 2.0 as people call it. They say that it's just improving that core with World, but just creating an even more attractive game behind that. Interestingly though, as they tell us, when they began to really begin any work on Wilds, as world updates slowed down and stopped, they had to look at the technology of the time and what was up and coming, because they knew they'd have to design the game around that next generation of platforms. And Wilds would never be released in time before that is established. And so by being on the next generation of platforms, what would that make possible beyond what was available in World? And what could they use in regards to that better technology to evolve the series, as they call it? They said that they've always pictured game design that allows players to immerse themselves in hunts as hunters, entering inside of Monster Hunter's carefully depicted ecosystems. That sensation was there to some degree in World, but what they've done with Wilds is try to take it further. This led to that seamless map design that we see now, and even how that relates to cooking, as we've talked about. Now we have this changing environment with this weather system, the time and so on, and a world that's more connected with how they're letting us travel from map to map with no loading screen. And they talk about being able to show these two sides of nature more directly now, where you've got a bountiful scenario that is still harsh, an environment that's rewarding and full of life, and yet obviously super dangerous at the same time because of the bigger monsters. They also talk about the way that it's still the same core hunting game, completing quests, going after certain monsters, but with this new way that it's a more seamless world and there's monsters that exist that might be currently hurt or wounded. You might change what you're currently doing based on something you encounter, changing quest on the fly without stopping to talk to a handler or go for a system, but by just immediately attacking that monster. They say that the design in past Monster Hunter games, where you're doing one quest at a time, does provide benefits for a stable environment, but it does feel unnatural in the way that a game like this depicts an ecosystem. It makes sense that you'd go out with a plan and things might happen that change that plan, whether that's the monsters you encounter or the winds that day. And so that's kind of the immersive core that they've been building from. It's really cool to hear. And what's interesting is that they didn't really plan or decide it to be an open world game, as we kind of call it now, where they were coming at it from that seamless perspective to generate that much more immersive experience. The developers apparently never thought of themselves as making an open world type game. It's just what sort of naturally happened, it would seem. And I also think that's really nice to hear that instead of just jumping on the quote-unquote open world bandwagon that happened after, say, Breath of Wild, the first Zelda game on the Switch, that had a huge impact on the gaming space and what came after that. This feels different. One thing they also talked about that I thought was quite interesting is how they said that they have data showing that many of the people who quit World partway through did so before they actually got to the part where they call it actually playing Monster Hunter. Maybe parts of that were because they couldn't find monsters, or they didn't actually know what to do when they reached them. Maybe the weapon they first picked up didn't end up suiting them, and then they felt too committed to it. So with Wilds, they're going very hard on guiding players to where the best fun of Monster Hunter is, without changing, as they say, the core of the series. They do say they're aware that there's always going to be people who never complete the game, no matter what they do. It's just important to analyze the reasons for that to happen, to address it as much as they can, I guess. They want to give people like that the best chance to grow step by step, as they say. And so I'm interested to see in the full game how they've gone about that. In a game that feels very open and, as they put it, seamless, allowing you to do lots of mostly anything you want in whatever order, what are they going to do to keep it on tracks to encourage you to learn things in the right way? On that note, they actually did a close analysis of player growth curve in regards to Great Jagras, the first monster of World. You could hit it from all kinds of places successfully with good damage, but then it had a wide range of attacks in return. And what they say here is interesting. Chatacabra is the first monster in Wilds, right? And it has only focused attacks, while the next monster, Cumatrice, has wider ranging attacks. To me, that actually suggests that Cumatrice could be the second large monster the main story wants you to hunt. Which is interesting because, you know, we haven't actually fought the thing even in the beta. So I'm still pretty convinced that in beta 2, that could be the other monster we get to hunt. Either way, they say that they've done this so that they can more gradually introduce different mechanics and aspects of the game's action, and it sounds smart. Finally, when asked what do they see in the future of the Monster Hunter series, it was Fujioka who said that he feels he's exhausted himself with Wilds, and it's going to be difficult to look at a broader view of the game until after release happens. But there's been a lot of change over the last decade or two, not just with Monster Hunter, but gaming in general. Like, online gaming has become the standard now. Hardware and tech progression is going crazy too. He even referenced how insane portable gaming was becoming with the release of the PSP. So all they can do is make games. And whenever something incredible with technology happens to offer new advancements, they end up with a lot of ideas with what to do in the next Monster Hunter. And so, Monster Hunter is going to keep changing to match those shifts and advances of the times. And that sounds awesome. So yeah, great interview. As a little bonus though, they did give us this kind of surprise GIF release the same day. All of these are listed on Giphy, and they're all official Capcom GIFs of higher quality cinematic moments from, say, the trailers or gameplay bits they've shown us. There's quite a lot of different reaction GIFs to look at there that you might want to use, and I'm sure they're going to update this as maybe they release more trailers and also after game launch too. But that'll do for now. That's my overview of the big things we're thinking about from all that new information. I hope this was interesting or just useful. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.